Good morning, good morning.
Morning. Am I still early?
Nope, you are exactly on time.
You say you late.
So go ahead, go to that link.
Okay.
Morning, good morning. Great to see everybody. Hey, Mr. T.
Good morning.
I pity the fool.
Sorry about the dogs. Clementine, it's okay.
I want everyone to start with that bit.ly link. It's a little quick survey. Good morning. Good morning. See, my wand didn't even roll out of bed yet.
Go.
Morning. Good to see everybody. Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Sarden. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Eliana. All right, we're going to take another minute for the survey. If you don't get the chance to finish now, we will have an opportunity to finish later. While people are finishing up the survey, how's everyone doing? Good.
I'm good, but I couldn't actually find the survey. When I went to bit.ly, it took me to buying. It looked like I'm trying to buy some spring break tickets to Reykjavik.
It's case sensitive.
Thank you.
I sent you the link, Mr. T. And I'm moving on up in the world. I have I've got a webcam, so I got side view, and I've got front view. I feel very fancy. So the physics students, we have a demo today, so I needed the extra webcam. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, if you are still doing the survey, that's fine. Finish it at some point. That way we can make decisions. Mr. Tapp and I can make some decisions about what we're going to do next week. We don't want to leave folks in the lurch, but you know, some folks really want to, I guess, relax in various ways, and maybe that involves not having this class for a little while. But I know that it's really important to stay connected. So just as a reminder, we do have 35 days until the EA. As far as we know, that is still absolutely running on schedule. Today, I wanted to go over question set 7.1 and also the guided notes. This is something that during the normal school year, we don't really have the opportunity to do very often, but it is something that I think Mr. Tapp and I want to do a lot more than we get to do, because reviewing questions is always a really good thing. So if we're not going to give specific answers for the question sets, for the question set questions, mostly we're going to guide you through it. We want you to discuss. If you don't feel comfortable discussing on audio, And I gotta say, Adrian, your hat game is on point. I love it. If you don't feel comfortable discussing on audio, please hit up the chat. Make sure that you're discussing through the chat, and not just privately, but with everybody, so that we can have a full class discussion on some of these questions. It really makes it, oh, I see you, Dade. All right. I'm gonna have to step up my own hat game now. All right. We see you, Maiwan. Okay. I see what this has become. Fair enough. All right, don't blow through all your hats first thing, Dade. We might be at this a while. All right. So let's go out to question set 7.1. That is number 144. All right, how does that look? You guys read that? Give me a thumbs up or something. Awesome, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Zainab. Aliana, I do expect you to bump up your hat game too. All right. So, good morning, Ayana. Okay, so something that I have been doing with the question sets, I don't know if you've noticed lately, but at the top of the question set, I've been giving the command terms. So you see that we've got the command terms state, outline, and suggest. And these are terms that you are going to see in the questions. And this tells you what IB expects you to actually do for each of these types of questions. State is really straightforward. When you have a state question, you are basically just saying what the name, the value, or another brief answer. It's even telling you be brief. In other words, it doesn't even need to be a complete sentence. All right, I like it, Maiwan. That's nice. So it can just be just the answer. Very straightforward, just the answer. Oh, I see your hat, Eunice. Okay. By the way, Ayana, you've missed the Great Hat Challenge. But I urge people to not blow through all of their hats all in day one. All right? No, Adrian knows. Okay. So, and so again, state a brief answer. It does not need to be long at all. Outline, give a brief account. They're even saying keep it short, okay? Give a brief account or summary. So they're not asking for a paragraph. This is like a sentence, all right? Now, if it's 2 or 3 or 4 marks, then you might need 2 or 3 or 4 different accounts or summaries. But outline is not asking for like a huge explanation. Suggest. Now that's an interesting one. For a suggest, they're asking for a solution, hypothesis, or some other possible answer. So they're asking you to actually like give us a solution. They're actually asking you to answer the problem, not just restate the problem or not talk around the problem. You have to be very direct with a suggest. So let's hop into the questions. So here we have figure 2. Now, what I do is I pull these questions out of previous external assessments, previous tests. And So this would be in the middle of a test. There would have been a figure 1. This happens to be figure 2. Always read all the information that you're given. What we have up here is we have energy consumption per capita in 2004. What does it mean? What does that per capita mean? Yep, thank you, Zainab. Per person. So the energy consumption per person in 2004, we can see in this heat map, and notice this is black and white because this is a printed version, and so you're going to have any heat maps, any maps like this are going to be in black and white. So energy consumption in million kilojoules. What the heck is that? First of all, let's break this down. So what does that kilo mean? That prefix kilo. 1,000, awesome. So a kilometer is 1,000 meters. A kilojoule is 1,000 joules. Now a joule is a measurement of energy. And a million kilojoules is like billions of joules. Right? That's what this is saying. So this is saying that energy consumption in billions of kilojoules per person in the United States and Canada is more than 150. The same thing with Australia, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and much of Western Europe and Northern Europe. So a lot of energy is consumed per person in all of these areas. We see that less than 50 million kilojoules is consumed in a lot of different areas. For example, Africa, Southeast Asia, parts of South America. Parts of South America are in this intermediate place, 50 to 150 million kilojoules. So Mexico, parts of South America, some parts of Africa, Eastern Europe, Middle East, some parts of Southeast Asia. So what we see is that it's the usual suspects, right? Western Europe, North America, Australia, typically are at the high ends of all these graphs. So your question is outline, there's that command term, 2 reasons for the difference in energy consumption between North and South America. So here's North America, here's South America. So let's just talk about one reason. All right, let's just talk about one reason. So participate on the chat or unmute yourself for the difference in energy consumption between North and South America. What would be one reason for that? So Zainab says availability of energy resources. Absolutely. In the US, we have a lot of availability, and we just talked about this with the lecture from 7.1. What do we have a lot of? What fossil fuel do we have a lot of? We have a significant amount of oil, but we have a whole lot more coal. Thanks, Arden. So we have a ton of coal, and so energy availability is absolutely one reason. And remember, since we're outlining, you can just give a brief account. All right? There is more energy available in North America due to coal supplies than in South America. Bam, that's one reason right there. Well, yes, I say boo to coal as well. And Zainab, to answer your question, can we also mention how North America may be more wealthy than South America? Yes, you can definitely mention that as long as you connect it to the consumption piece. If you just say that they're wealthier, then I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving that as an answer. I would definitely want to make that connection. So Mr. Tout asked you a question about what do we call wealthier countries in general? Yeah, I heard that. So MEDCs, right? And then the less wealthier countries are called what? Those are your LEDCs. So more, less economically developed countries. Sometimes people say most or least for more or less. It doesn't really matter. It's just making that distinction about which ones are essentially the rich ones and which ones are the poor ones. It's a politically correct way of saying that. We don't say first world and third world. That's considered to be an insulting term. So that's number one. Let's move on to number two. We
What
see
is it
another
called? So what
figure
is it?
here. I'll stop for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
What is what's it called? The LEDC, because it's an abbreviation. What is that called?
An acronym.
Is it an acronym? Okay.
Well, I don't pronounce it as an acronym. I don't say MEDC, LEDC.
Okay.
But if you do, then that would be an acronym.
Okay. All right.
All right, so two reasons for the different, oh, I'm reading the same question again. All right, so number two, we're looking at two factors that may cause the proportion of non-fossil fuels to be greater than projected for 2030. So we need to read this graph the same way we read the other graph. Start with the information that you're given up here. Figure 3, historical and projected changes in the proportions of different energy sources used. So what does it mean that we're looking at the changes in the proportions?
Like the size of the pie.
Okay, I heard something about sizes, about relative sizes. Yeah, we're looking at how things have changed over time. We're not looking at the total amount, and I think that's what's tricky about this one. We're not looking at the total amount. We're not looking at like how much total renewables have been used over time. We're not looking at how much total oil has been used over time. We're looking at relatively how much oil is used versus relatively how many renewables versus relatively how much nuclear. So in 1971, we see that it looks like 40% of energy sources were oil. It looks like somewhere around 20–25% were gas. It looks like that looks to me about 25% to be coal, and then maybe another 20% to be renewables. What do we see happening to that slice of renewables over time?
It's going down. It's depleting.
It decreases and increases.
Speak up, Ayana. I heard you, Dade. I agree with you, Dade. Speak up, Ayana.
It decreases and then it increases like slightly more.
It increases slightly more. Is that a real number or is that a projected number?
Projected.
Right. So be careful with that. That's a projected number, and that's what they're asking about in this question about why it is that this relative proportion that went down from 1971, the relative mix of renewables, is slated to go up in 2030, keeping in mind that this is a relative amount. All right. So more renewables were used overall in 2010 than in 1971, because overall we were using way more energy in 2010 than in 1971, but the relative proportion of renewables decreased. So what do we see increased between 1971 and 2010 as a proportion?
We began to use less gas and coal, which caused the abundance of it to go back in the projected 2030.
So I don't necessarily agree with that being a cause and effect. I do say there being less slightly less coal being used from 1971 to 2010, relatively, remember, still way more coal being used in 2010 than 1971. But what do we see? Which slice increased or appeared from 1971 to 2010?
Nuclear.
Right. People were very anti-nuclear in the 1960s and 1970s following the use of the nuclear weapons in World War II. And so people kind of connected those ideas of using nuclear weapons and using nuclear energy for power, and they were very much against it. Public opinion changed in the decades between, and so we started using more and more very safe nuclear power, a much higher proportion. Now, there is a fossil fuel that is projected to have increased between 2010 and 2030. Which fossil fuel is projected to have increased between those two? Yep, so that's natural gas, not just gas, but that's natural gas. And we're seeing that happening with fracking and with other extraction techniques, especially getting natural gas out of landfills. And that's a relative increase from 2010. Okay, so let's get to the question here. 2 factors, so let's just go over one. Hey, who's drawing? I'm gonna erase that. So, 2 factors that may cause the proportion of non-fossil fuels to be greater than projected for 2030. Non-fossil fuels. Which of these slices correspond with non-fossil fuels? Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Which are non-fossil fuels? Good, renewables. Woo. All right, renewables are one. There's a second one that is a non-fossil fuel.
Solar or nuclear.
Well, we don't have a slice for solar. Solar is contained within the renewables. Thank you, Zainab. The other one is this one, the nuclear. All right, the nuclear slice is non-fossil fuels. So 2 factors that may cause the proportion of non-fossil fuels, these guys, to be greater than projected. So what might cause, let's suggest one factor that might cause these 2 slices to be even bigger slices when 2030 actually rolls around. What's one factor that might cause that? Yeah, if we lose our fossil fuel resources, absolutely. How might we lose fossil fuel resources? What does that mean? All right, so using too high a proportion. All right, I think that's that might be worth a mark. All right, and I'm not trying to blow down on that answer. I'm just saying that you want to look for really strong answers here. What effect might it have of using too much fossil fuels in too short of a time?
It could overrun the atmosphere with carbon dioxide.
Right, so that would bump up carbon dioxide levels, and people might, governments, right, and this is kind of the connection that you need to make. Governments may stop funding those fossil fuels. They might stop funding the extraction of those fossil fuels because carbon dioxide levels are going up. So remember, a suggest is giving Remember, a suggest is giving a solution, a hypothesis. All right. So you need to be very specific about the suggest, but you don't have to be wordy about your suggest. Just have to make sure it's very specific. Don't just say, well, people will use more solar. That's not really a factor. Why would people use more solar is where you need to go with that. All right, any other comments about number 2? Okay, so let's move on to number 3. Now, I apologize, I didn't put a table in to this one. There was originally a table on the actual test, but we're looking for one advantage and one disadvantage for each of fossil fuels and renewables. Yep, I agree with you, Zainab. We all have to pay close attention to the command terms. So we're in this question, we are stating one advantage and one disadvantage, meaning this can be as brief as you want it to be. This can be a couple words. So let's go through and let's go through the difficult ones. Let's give an advantage for fossil fuels. What would be an advantage for you, the use of fossil fuels?
The fact that we're already doing it, and it would be it would be easier to just keep on doing what we're doing instead of transferring to something new.
100%. It is a case of maintaining the status quo, just continuing it because we already have the infrastructure in place, meaning we already have all of the factories, we have cars that run on fossil fuels, we have all the things already in place to make that happen. Excellent. I'll leave the disadvantage up to you guys. And I agree, Ayana, low cost, easy to transport. Zainab, I agree, cheaper. They do make things easier. So then let's talk about the disadvantage, a disadvantage of renewables.
They can negatively impact the atmosphere and run the resources out the earth.
I disagree that renewables can negatively impact the atmosphere. There may be very specific cases where that is true, but overall that wouldn't be a strong answer. Elena says cost more. Absolutely. That is a huge fear, especially people putting like solar panels on their houses. That can be very expensive. Yeah, you can save energy in the long run. You can save money in the long run, but it's very expensive to do in the first place. Ayana, it can be hard to reproduce the quantity of it. Absolutely. You have to have a lot of wind turbines, a lot of solar panels up, a lot of tidal power up in order to replicate the same amount of energy that you would get out of fossil fuels. So I completely agree. That's a great disadvantage. I agree, H. I'm not sure what I'm agreeing with H, but there you go. Thank you, Elena. I think you probably are typing more, and I'll wait for it. So, no problem. So let's move on to number 4. Now, again, we're stating. Remember, stating is just throwing a phrase out there. It doesn't have to be complete sentences. You can totally manage your time well on the EA just by looking at that command term. So 3 reasons why global energy use continues to rise. Why? So let's go through 1 or 2 reasons why we continue to use more global energy. All right, I agree that there is higher demand, but that's not a reason, that's kind of an effect. Ooh, population growth. Nice. Yes, Zainab. As long as population continues to grow, then that means that there's more global energy use. Something interesting while people are coming up with answers for this. Something interesting that's happening right now all over the world is that global energy use is decreasing a little bit, especially output of carbon dioxide is decreasing as everyone stops commuting to work, stops using public transportation. What we're seeing is that carbon dioxide levels are actually decreasing worldwide. Global energy use continues to rise because of innovation of renewable resources. I think you could definitely make that argument. It's not a strong one because as we innovate new renewable resources, then we're actually using energy a little bit more efficiently. So, but people feel better about using renewables, so you could take that angle. High demand in natural gases and fossil fuels, I agree, but what is the root cause of that high demand? Zainab said population growth as creating that demand, but what Ayana might create, what might be another reason why there's that high demand?
Becoming more economically developed, like India and such.
Good. So as LEDCs start to develop more industry, right? They're getting more money, they're making more money, they're investing that money into more industry that is consuming more energy. Good. So I think if you don't have 3 reasons at this point, you're pretty close. So let's move on to the last one, number 5. Oh, and before we move on to number 5, take note real quick that this one was worth 3 marks. That should be no surprise to you because you see, state 3 reasons. So to get all 3 marks, you need to have 3 reasons. Always pay attention to the number of marks. That'll help you understand how many different answers you need in your response. So it's always good to take a look at that. So down here for number 5, we see this is worth 1 mark. So you're not going to get that mark unless you do both of these things, unless you state 2 of the sources of energy. If you just state 1, you're not going to get any marks. That'll be 0 marks. They're a little bit tricky with that, but pay close attention. So this is a cartoon, and they like to throw cartoons on the EAs as well because they want you they want you really being able to interpret kind of modern culture and interpret how people are seeing the world from an artistic viewpoint as well. So the answer is right in there as long as you know the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. And I'm seeing lots of great answers so far on the chat. So I see state 2 of the sources of energy shown in figure 7 that are renewable. Is oil renewable? Shake your head or nod. Good. Is solar renewable?
No. Yes, it is.
Good. Is wind renewable?
Yes.
That is an enthusiastic yes.
Yeah.
Is tidal renewable? Ooh, what is tidal?
What?
Tidal.
Like water?
Like what? Like the tides. Yeah. Great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear you. My bad.
So tidal is renewable because the moon, as long as the moon continues to orbit the Earth, and if that stops happening, then we're in bigger trouble. But as long as the moon continues to orbit the Earth, then we will continue having tides and tidal power. Is nuclear.
If it got closer to the Earth, though, wouldn't that also cause problems?
Yes, there is a great book about that, and I forget what it's called. But there is a great young adult dystopian novel about what if the moon suddenly got displaced about like 100,000 miles closer to the Earth. Is nuclear renewable?
Oh, wait.
it's your weakest answer here. I would avoid saying nuclear is renewable. A lot of scientists do say that it is. And to a certain extent it is, as long as we can continue mining new resources that are radioactive. But it is less renewable on a longer time scale. Whereas solar, wind, and tidal are all renewable on a long time scale. So I would definitely choose among those three. All right, any other questions about the question set? Okay, so let's go ahead and open up the guided notes from 7.1. I'm going to open up this one first. We may have enough time to go through both of them depending on which kind of guided notes you use. So I'm thinking that the best way to go through these guided notes is for you guys to have them open the notes that you took during the lecture. If you did not take notes during the lecture, still participate in the discussion. But let's go through step by step here. So the first point, and these are from the IB syllabus, fossil fuels contribute to the majority of humankind's energy supply, and they vary widely in the impacts of their production and their emissions. Their use is expected to increase to meet global energy demand. So what are some really important points from that first section about fossil fuels? What were some things that got brought up in the lecture?
Tidal power. Tidal power.
I don't think that's an answer.
Hydropower.
So what are some different fossil fuels? Let's start there.
Nuclear bomb.
Not quite. So Zainab says fossil fuels are stored as solar energy. Fossil fuels are stored solar energy from how long ago? Yesterday, 100 years ago, a million years ago, several million years ago? Yeah, millions of years ago. And we use those fossil fuels up like that, all right? We use them up super, super quickly. That's what makes them non-renewable, because we're using them up faster than they are being produced. So that's a good point to remember. What are some types of fossil fuels? We just talked about this with the question set. So what are some different types of fossil fuels? Good, we have crude oil. That's the oil we get out of the ground.
Coal.
Coal. What else? So what about fracking? And thanks, Ayana. These are really the big three fossil fuels: oil, coal, and natural gas. All right. Anything else about fossil fuels that you had as notes? So those of you who had incomplete notes, or maybe you weren't around for lecture 7.1, this seems like a great time to make sure that you have all your notes complete. And remember, this all gets posted to YouTube later. So in case you miss any of it, you can go back through it. Okay, so 712, sources of energy with lower carbon dioxide emissions than fossil fuels include renewable energy. It even tells you, right? Here are the kinds of renewable energy that we're talking about. And their use is expected to increase. Nuclear power is a low carbon, low emission, non-renewable resource, but it's controversial due to the radioactive waste it produces and the potential scale of any accident. So a couple really important points to make sure that you're remembering from this. You know what solar is, but biomass is one of those that's not quite obvious. So what do we mean when we say biomass? Who has their notes from 7.1? Biomass. Or who has the Google? Oh, great. Organic matter used as fuel. Thank you. So, organic matter might help if I was typing in the right place. All right. Organic matter used as fuel. So there's a lot of different things that we can use as fuel. You may have a fireplace at home. You might even use biofuels, like trees. There are a lot of fast-growing biofuels, but the big one is ethanol made from corn. And even in some places, they use sugarcane and burn sugarcane because it grows super quick and it's high in carbohydrates, which when you burn carbohydrates, you get lots of energy out. So that's what we're talking about with biomass. That organic matter is used as fuel. That's a great answer. Another one that maybe requires a little bit of explanation is wave power. If you can harness wave power, so especially on the coast, like on the coast of New York City, they have all of these wave energy generators. So that is harnessing the power of waves and converting it to energy. How about geothermal? I think that's the one that we haven't really talked about too much. What is geothermal energy? Where do we get that from? The Earth. Where in the Earth? Yep. So inside the Earth, there is heat that we can capture. I was lucky enough to have gone to Iceland this past summer, and most of Iceland actually runs off of geothermal energy. What they do is they dig these pipes, they fill the pipes with a certain kind of oil. That oil is able to quickly capture heat, and the oil is recycled. It's a closed system, so the oil doesn't escape. They don't have to replace it. But the oil is able to transfer that heat from deep inside the Earth up to the people's homes. And so what happens is that that oil just circulates throughout the home, and it works like a radiator, and it just lets off that heat inside the home. And they don't have to burn any fossil fuels. They don't even have to have any wind or solar. They just use the heat from inside the Earth, and they pump it up to their homes. And it can get pretty cold in Iceland, and they're able to heat all their homes into very nice temperatures through geothermal. All right, and then let's say one word about nuclear here, and that is about nuclear waste. Iceland is actually not in North America. Part of Iceland is in North America. Part of Iceland is in Europe. It's on the plate between North America and Europe, and it is actually getting bigger by a couple centimeters every year. as the two tectonic plates actually spread out from each other, Iceland just keeps getting bigger.
They're divergent plates.
They are divergent plates, excellent. And no, I can't take you there. I could barely afford to take me there. But
Isn't part of it like, it's like
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Denmark territory?
That's Greenland. So
Oh, that's Greenland,
Greenland
right?
has a partnership with Denmark.
Okay,
Okay, so
all right.
let's say one word about nuclear waste here. What did we say in the lecture about nuclear waste?
Nuclear waste cannot be disposed of for like years or ever.
Yeah,
There you go.
excellent. So disposal requires protection for thousands of years. So it can't really, like Una said, it can't really be disposed of. All right, let's move on to energy security. So we see that energy security depends on adequate, reliable, and affordable supply of energy that provides a degree of independence. An inequitable availability and uneven distribution of energy sources may lead to conflict. Ooh, those are some $5 words. Mr. Ellenbogen would be proud of you guys using these words. So, inequitable availability, translate that to English for us. I mean, it's English, but what does inequitable availability mean? So it's yes, thank you, Zainab. It's actually unequal. It's that we know that US, Western Europe have far more access to energy than do places like South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. So it's inequitable. It's not equal. It's not even across the board. And because of that, it creates these inequities in economies, in ability for people to just go about their daily lives in order to be able to afford food. A lot of that comes back to availability of energy. It's also unevenly distributed, which means that it's not available in the same amounts throughout the entire world. But the second point I really want to emphasize about conflict. What does it mean that the inequitable availability and uneven distributions may lead to conflict? Yep, terrorism, war.
It means they're gonna try to forcefully get what they want.
Yeah, exactly. So certain countries try to force other countries to gain their resources. Awesome. And we see this happening. I certainly hope that we stop seeing it happening as we come together as one world in times like this. But that is unfortunately what happens as a result. All right, the energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, sustainability, scientific and technological developments, cultural attitudes, and political, economic, and environmental factors. These in turn affect energy security and independence. There's a lot to unpack there, but what do we mean by energy choices? Let's put that into our own words. What do we mean by energy choices? Again, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
something. Like making the right decision.
Right? Making a decision about what?
Which energy to use.
Which energy to use. And what's involved in that? Go ahead.
I guess who can be. Yeah. That's all.
Let's say that again.
Like which energy source you want to use.
Right. But what factors into that is what I'm saying. You're right, but what factors into that? Zainab says price and availability. Go ahead, Anna.
I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, price, availability. There are lots of other factors. Obviously, they're listed right here: availability, sustainability, how technologically developed it is, what the cultural attitudes are. If everyone in the US said, you know what, oil is nasty, oil is dirty, I'm going to stop using gas in my car, that would be a cultural attitude that would shift. And that may happen. So people may start making the choice to say, you know what, I'm going to buy an electric car because having a gas-powered car is like smoking cigarettes. Nobody wants to be around somebody who does that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do the trendy thing and buy the electric car. So cultural attitudes do play a role. Obviously, politics plays a role because right now we're in the middle of a political gas war, and gas prices are the lowest that they've been since 2002, I believe. So definitely the lowest that they've been within your lifetimes, which is pretty crazy. There are obviously economic and environmental factors as well. So gas prices have been low because of for a lot of reasons. Demand has been low. So when demand is low, prices go low. And then they've also been low because Russia and Saudi Arabia have been having a price war over their supplies of gas. And they just keep on going lower and lower and lower. And right now, I think a barrel, which is 42 gallons, a barrel of crude oil is somewhere in the $20 range. Normally it's probably between 70 and $100. So it's pretty crazy cheap oil right now.
Do you remember how expensive gas was when you started, when you like turned 16?
It was like 95 cents.
Yep.
Yeah. And then in 2008, with the crisis that happened then, the recession, it bumped up to $4.
Yeah, I remember that.
So gas prices are really volatile. All right, last point, and then we're gonna close up shop. By the way, Friday, tomorrow, lecture 7.2. All right. Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. Celebrate. All right. Last piece, improvements in energy efficiency and energy conservation can limit growth in energy demand and contribute to energy security. So what is one thing that you can do to make your, hello, that's pink. Did you do that, Mr. Tao?
I don't think so.
Right. Who did that? Okay.
Who did that? I'm dead.
All right. To make things more energy efficient, what can we do? What is one thing that you can do right now? Efficiency.
I can turn off. Am I muted? Oh,
Turn off.
okay. I can turn off my lights.
Yeah. Turn
Ooh,
off.
I can unplug my computer and leave this chat. Ooh.
I was looking for that answer because you could absolutely unplug your computer. You could read a book. You could go outside, do all sorts of things, keep your social distance. But exercise, you see those videos that I've been posting for those exercises that my nieces, they're 6 and 11, they've been putting together. You can do all those things. Keep yourself healthy by keeping mentally healthy. Those of you in CS and computer science, I'm gonna leave this, but I will be right back. So I will see everyone else tomorrow for lecture 7.2.
Good to see you guys.
Love you guys. Bye.